Okay, so we're going to do an example, and we're going to talk about flowers. And so, in this specific breed of flower, you have tall flowers, which is dominant, to dwarf plants, which is recessive. So that's the first trait we're going to be talking about. Next, they have either purple flowers or they have white flowers. Purple flowers is going to be dominant to the white flowers. So we're going to signify that by a big P for dominant, a little p for recessive. Tall plants are big T, dwarf plants are little t. Now, you're going to write the genotype, which remember is the genetic makeup, the same way that you would in a monohybrid cross, but you're going to write both pairs of alleles together. Now you want to make sure you always write the full genotype for both parents, so you're showing both traits. So you should have 4 alleles for each parent. So for our example, I'm going to say that we have 2 parents that are heterozygous for both traits. So if I write that in words, we have both parents are heterozygous for both traits. Okay, so if both parents are heterozygous for both traits, remember heterozygous has one of each, the dominant and recessive alleles. So parent number 1 is going to have the genotype big T, little t, big P, little p, and then it's going to be crossed with another parent that will have the genotype, the same thing, big T, big P, little p. I'm going to signify that with 2 different colors. Okay, so you're like, okay, wow, I have 4. Do I write 1 letter above each box, or what do I do? So what you're going to have to do with these that's a little bit different is you're going to have to figure out what are all the possible allele combinations that that parent could give to its offspring. And so these are in the gametes as well. Remember, the gametes being the egg or the sperm. And so you're going to have to figure out what all those possible combinations are. Now, if you got into this in math, you think about like the FOIL method where you have first, outside, inside, last. But if you haven't gotten to that, you're going to have to take 1 allele from each trait. So we're talking about tall versus dwarf here, and we're talking about purple versus white here. So you're going to take 1 allele from each and put them together, and that's going to be 1 allele combination. Now, if you do all the possible combinations, you're always going to have 4 possible combinations for each parent. So that's why we have a 16 square Punnett square here, because each parent will have 4 possible combinations. So if we look here at our first parent, if we take the first allele from each trait and we link those together, that would be our first allele combination. So that would be big T, big P. The next one, we take this first big T and we pair it up with the second allele from the second trait. So then that gives us big T, little p. Then if we take the second allele and pair it up with the first of the second trait, we'd have little t, big P. And then finally we have the little t paired with the last one, which is little t, little p. Now, personally, I like to start with the dominant, completely dominant, completely dominant, then the heterozygous kind of, and then the completely recessive. But you can do it however you'd like. That's just how I choose to do it. Now, parent number 2, if you pair these up the same way, you will get the same things because they are both heterozygous individuals. So both parents will give big T, big P, big T, little p, little t, big P, little t, little p. Now, how you're going to set up your Punnett square is going to be very similar to your monohybrid crosses, except you're going to have 2 letters above each square. So I can erase our in words here. So I have space. So you're going to write each of your allele combinations above each box. Big T, big P, big T, little p, little t, big P, little t, little p. Same thing on this side with my other color. Now, you're going to combine these within the squares just like you did in the monohybrid crosses. And I'll do it in all the same colors so we don't get confused. You always want to put the same letters together and put the capital letter first. Okay, so now that you have all the squares filled out, this is all the possible combinations that those offspring could, their genotype that the offspring could be. So next what you're going to have to do, a lot of times you'll be asked for what the phenotypic ratio is. So remember, phenotype is the physical characteristics. So if we look up here at the top, you're going to think about what are all those possible phenotypes that they could have when you look at both traits. So if you have 2 of each, so it's like you have a black pair of pants and a khaki pair of pants and a blue shirt and an orange shirt. So what are all those possible combinations? So you could have you could wear your khaki pants with the blue shirt, your khaki pants with the orange shirt. You could wear your black shirt with or your black pants with the orange shirt and your black pants with the blue shirt. So that's 4 possible combinations. The same thing here. You're going to have 4 possible combinations of phenotypes. So I'm going to get down here and we're going to write these down here. So your first combination would be, they could be tall and purple. They could be tall and white. They could be dwarf and purple. And they could be dwarf and white. So I encourage you, as you're doing these dihybrid crosses, to always write out what your 4 possibilities could be. Now, we're going to use 4 different colors and mark all of these different phenotypes. So first, let's start out with orange, and we're going to talk about how many could be tall and purple. Now, remember, tall is dominant and purple is dominant. So dominant, you only need 1 dominant allele for each trait for it to actually be, to actually express that dominant trait. So if we look here, any of them that have at least 1 big T and 1 big P. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we have 9 of them that have at least one dominant trait, one dominant allele for each trait, which makes it tall and purple. So we have 9 of those. Next, we're going to take a blue and we're going to mark those that are tall and white. Now tall, it needs at least one big T, and to be white, it's recessive, so it needs both recessive alleles to be white. So let's look here. We have 1 right here, 1 right here, and 1 right here. Because it has at least one big T and 2 little p's. So we have 3 of those. Next, we're going to use green to mark those that are dwarf and purple. Now it switches. To be dwarf, it needs 2 little t's, and to be purple, it needs at least one big P. So we need 2 little t's and at least one big P. So that is 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. So that gives you 3. And then finally in brown, we're going to mark how many are dwarf and white. So it's recessive for both traits, so it needs both recessive alleles for both traits. And there's only 1 left, so process of elimination, you have 1 that is dwarf and white. Now, you can notice here that your ratio is 9 to 3 to 3 to 1. This is the ratio you will always get when you cross 2 heterozygous individuals. Only when you cross 2 heterozygous individuals. When you have, in a dihybrid cross, 2 heterozygotes. I can't say that enough. You're not always going to get this same ratio. It depends on what the parent's genotype is. But you can always guarantee that that will be your ratio, and so that can be your check for if you're doing a dihybrid cross with 2 heterozygous individuals. If you don't get that ratio, then you did something wrong. Either your allele combinations are wrong, or you made a mistake somewhere in your Punnett square. So I encourage you, when you make these Punnett squares, to be very organized and to always write the capital letter first and write the same letters together so that it's easy to mark them. So you also can see that you have a trend that comes out that usually like here in kind of a stair-step manner are the more dominant, and then you have the more recessive ones, or the heterozygous, down here in this corner. So that's kind of a trend that you can see as well. So hopefully that helps and you understand dihybrid crosses a little bit better.